Hello and welcome to this video, which is a portion of the annual report for Abingdon Episcopal Church for the year 2020. Throughout the year 2020, as we faced pandemic, we focused on being community. This series of conversations are by members of our community as we focus on the ministries that we did. As we think back to when the church was founded, as we read in the book of Acts, there are many characteristics which define the church. As we find ourselves in a new situation, we too had to ask ourselves, what are we being as we learn to be the church? As the early church did, they had to learn. As we have had to do in this pandemic, we have had to learn. I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with members of Abingdon Church as we explore how we learned and affirmed our opportunity to be the church God has called us to be. Well, we are continuing our conversations about how Abingdon was the church in 2020. And now we have a conversation that looks about how we are being stewards of our financial resources. In the book of Acts, we have a couple examples of how the church gathered together. The main point I would raise up for you is that they looked at their finances as being an integral part of what they were as a church. And so I've invited Terri and Hugh to be part of this conversation. So let's think back about all of 2020 and just think about how we began very normally. You know, the 2020, January and February were sort of as they were typically. You know, we began that way. Who remembers early 2020?
Well, first thing that comes to mind is the Mardi Gras. That's the big event that I really look forward to every year. And apparently we're very successful in our event. We had a great turnout. People are still meeting their pledge to cook a meal or have you over when that's available. But I think Abingdon is based around being together. And I think that's the biggest sadness for me. But I do have the warmth of the Mardi Gras event.
Well, and that makes me think of the times that we typically would get together that we didn't necessarily. I mean, other events that we would have throughout the year.
Yeah, I know. I really missed the oyster roast and the pig roast this past year. Those were always fun events to get together with. They were fundraisers, but they really were, for me, social events.
Yeah. And the pumpkin patch was one that has in the past couple of years brought in money for youth missions, and of course that we had that planned out a lot, and it just wasn't going to take place because the pumpkins couldn't get delivered. And so
and what's amazing is how many people I bumped into in the community that are not members of Abingdon that were going, I'm holding off on my pumpkins. Are you guys going to do it again this year? Yeah. So that definitely has an impact in our community.
Yeah. And so it's a lot of ways we impact it. Well, another, as you talk about the community, another thing that impacted us was that a lot of the groups that meet at Abingdon Church, because we weren't allowed to open our building up because of safety protocols, couldn't be here. You know, a typical year, each weeknight there's something going on, from the AA meetings or Five Women's or different. Five Rivers Women's Club, Five Rivers Women's Club, different groups taking place and meeting here, and so just the level of activity was lower as far as the community coming into our space. So
and that did affect our finances both ways. I mean, we had less income because a lot of these organizations donate to us. On the other hand, we did save some money with electricity costs and things like that, but we still had overhead no matter what.
Yeah, we couldn't just turn the building off and I mean, we had pipes that we didn't want to freeze. We had we did cut the air conditioning and the heating back here, but we still had to maintain a building, and so even with the church, we have to keep the humidity level for the organ and for books and those kinds of things. So yeah. We have to be good stewards of those physical resources, which has an implication on how we're being stewards of our financial resources too. Yeah,
we were able this year to get the sewer installed and relieve our septic system.
Yeah,
that was mostly paid for with money, fortunately, we had saved from the previous year from the tree harvest.
Yeah.
So it cost us about $30,000, but we did have that money available that we had saved from the prior year.
Yeah. Terry, you see how he brought in the tree harvest so we couldn't accuse him of being a potty mouth on that one. So, yeah, but we had a lot of physical things that got done to maintain the plant, to make sure that the buildings are ready for use and not falling down. Now that Stu Pollock had done some repairs on the siding. Shan Rose did some gardening for us. So those are both things we had in our budget, and so implications of maintaining the church going on. Yeah.
Well, and I know you were responsible for crawling underneath the church at one point to install the audiovisual system.
Yeah.
And I think it's important.
Year. Yeah.
But, you know, that's to effectively stream, you know, our services to our growing, really remote Abington family. And a lot of that was covered by special contributions that covered almost all of that expense.
And that was really heartwarming to see how the congregation responded, because our idea, we had a decision to make there. It was a stewardship decision, essentially. Do we buy just enough equipment to get us through the pandemic, or do we use this as an opportunity to expand our ministries? And so we made the decision, and it was a bigger price tag, but the congregation with their offerings and gifts supported that pretty much so. And so, yeah, I did see more dead raccoon bodies under the church than I thought I would want to. But you know, one of those classes they don't teach you in seminary is how to say no to crawling under the church. Maybe I should have taken that one. But it's a community, and so it's yeah, we do what we can, and so we come together and have those things in place for us.
Well, we also were able this year to maintain, even with all our challenges, maintained our tithe to the diocese at 10%. So I think that's another good piece of news for us.
Well, and yeah, the thing that we always remind ourselves of is that we are not an island. We are not a tub on our own bottom. We have responsibilities with that. The church finances are connected to individual people's finances and stewardship, and corporately we're connected to the wider church, the diocese. We're connected to the Episcopal Church. We're connected to, so there's this web of connectedness that we are involved in.
Well, and going on with the AV thing, the fact that we have, so many of us have become comfortable with Zoom so that we still can connect. The fact that we did Vacation Bible School through virtual, that they do Sunday school every Sunday, that we have coffee hour. We've really expanded our opportunity to stay connected. And as time progresses, I don't think those things are going to go away.
Right. Right. Well, I think the connections were ones that I would see Wendy making deposits. I saw that we opened connections up for people to give to us in new ways. PayPal was a new experience for us, and we started doing that. I was, we didn't have the offering plate to put, pass around by the ushers and things this year. And I'm sure that had an impact on our giving. We also had a lot of people paying their pledges and they're being very faithful in their giving as well.
And I think we were actually, we saw a lot of decreases, but there were people that really, did what they could given the pandemic. And so I think that's very encouraging. And we have the first and second Sunday program. So even though our cash plate collection was down for what we see for the budget, the first, second Sundays are donated to benevolence funds, Bread for Life, and other charitable organizations and causes. And that actually was very generous this year, and resulted in us an app to be able to give over $5,000 more to those programs than they did in 2019, which I think is actually amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things of our Anglican identity is that we care for this portion of the world that God's entrusted to us. And so one of the themes we have at Abingdon in good years and in challenging years is how do we care for our wider community? How do we be that light of Christ for these people? And for us, a lot of times it means I'll have another conversation about some tangible things, but a lot of times it means for us that we are giving our focus, our time, our treasure toward these community things, and we see that evidenced in our finances as well. Yeah.
Well, we kind of think about, you talked about the oyster roast and the pig roast. I thought the harvest dinner was kind of different. Being in the freshman vestry class, that's our responsibility. And we just put our heads together and said, how can we still share a meal with our friends? And we were so fortunate. We were at the beach with family from so we represented 3 different Episcopal churches, 3 different generations. And it was exciting to be able to show how wide the community really is. Mm-hmm. And it's now kind of a joke when I take Bill Naquin's soup to somebody that at home, they'll go, is this the soup from the harvest dinner? I go, that's the same recipe. So we now have a new Abingdon recipe that I think people are enjoying.
It was also in the harvest dinner was interesting. Typically in a typical year, and with the change that phrase a little bit, I would stand up, or someone would stand up in the parish house and have sort of a reflection or a presentation or something. And this year we had to change that, and so it was the video of sort of stripping the altar, or sort of building the altar, and how that was elements of our community. And so many people told me that they had never been that close to the altar. I did take all their names and give them to the Altar Guild as potential members. but more importantly, it was just that sense of, oh, I'm connected in a new and different way. So it's been a year of seeing how do we connect. Yeah. Well, and speaking of harvest dinner, that takes us into next year and to 2021. Here we are in a new year. Some new challenges that we have, some new opportunities that we have going on. This is the annual report for 2020, but sort of as we sort of look ahead, any thoughts on where that's going to be for us from a financial stewardship kind of perspective?
I think it's going to be a challenge. This year we ended up close to budget, despite losing pledge income of $10,000 and non-pledge income of $6,000 and cash played, even with the PayPal, of $3,000 loss compared to the previous year, and use of building $3,000 loss. So there were a lot of negatives there. We made up for it this year with a PPP loan that covered about a month and a half of our expenses. That payment protection plan covered salaries and some electricity expenses. And then we also were able to save some money, as mentioned earlier, with the Vacation Bible School, a very innovative way to do that, that really worked. And then again, our electricity and water expenses were somewhat decreased because of decreased use of the building. And the staff was able to save a lot of office expenses as they kind of pivoted to more electronic communication. I think next year's gonna be more of the same. I mean, we're going to have trouble having some of these fundraiser events. And I think there are going to be some people who are going to have trouble, donating like they have in the past. And we've lost some, key members of our parish in the last year. So it's going to be a challenge, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think it is. And partly it's not that I want to jump into the fray, but partly I think to be the healthy body of Christ means that we don't step away from those challenges, that we continue to ask ourselves, what is God asking us to do? What is how do we make the programs match the financial resources? And as a baptized Christian, I say the church never has enough resources. The mission of the church is to spread the gospel in all the world. And so when someone say, "Oh, do you have enough?" I'm like, "No, you never have enough." And so no matter what you do, and so part of that tension sort of says, how do you think creatively and use what you have to be a good steward? And that's the account we have to give. Yeah, it's been a good conversation. Any other thoughts we want to add in before we wrap this up?
Well, I think our treasurer has taken an amazing look at our finances and has been very helpful in his advice to the vestry as we've gone through this year. I appreciate all your time and effort for that, Hugh. I think you're do a lot behind the scenes that people aren't aware of.
It's a good ministry.
It is.
The opportunity.
I would say, Terri, your comments are exactly correct. That everything is clear and in good steward. And I would say part of that is that the vestry takes responsibility of making sure they perform an audit every year, and so they make sure all those safeguards are in place. And so I think we have a community of honest people. I think the rector is honest, first of all. I think the treasurer is honest. But across the world of churchdom, you need to make sure you've got a separate set of eyes looking at all the system to say, you know, are checks being signed correctly? Are things being, are invoices, does all make sense? So we're using those stewardship resources in a good financial manner for us. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time and for this conversation. For those who are watching this, there will be, because this is a very financial kind of thing, there will be printed information about our balance sheet and those things available. You can find those, and so don't take this conversation as the end of that. For those seeking more detailed information, that's available to you. Hugh and Terri, thanks for the conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Okay, good talking with you.
Great to talk to you guys. Appreciate
Take care.
Bye. Thank you for watching this conversation with members of Abingdon Church as we've explored how the church has been the church in 2020. There are a series of 8 videos that comprise this annual report. Hope you'll watch them all. And please join us for worship, service, and faith. Abingdon Church.